Anne Laguza, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Craig. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So everybody listening, this is Anne, my friend, my coaching client. And I describe you as like the HR expert, leadership expert, corporate expert. But how would you describe, like, when you're meeting somebody for the first time, or when you're speaking at one of those events, when you're speaking, I know you spoke at Fit Body Boot Camp the other week for Bedros and my friends there. How do you introduce yourself?
So I usually introduce myself by saying I'm a human resources and leadership development consultant.
Mhm.
My passion is all about leadership development. But where I'm located in California, there's a whole host of human resource challenges that come along with the laws and compliance. So it seems like every time I'm coaching a leader, I have to navigate through that as well.
Now, I really want to jump into some differences, the biggest differences that you see between low performers and high performers. And what we're talking about there is team members. So, for the entrepreneurs listening to this, for the managers listening to this, or the C-level executives listening to this, you've seen hundreds of teams, thousands of team members. How do you differentiate between low performers and high performers? And then we'll get into how the heck do we support them to bring everybody up and to really make those high performers even better.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. And it's really simplifying them, right? It's like, here's a low performer, here's a high performer. And what I find a lot of times is when I get phone calls about performance in general, my clients are often surprised when I've identified someone as a low performer that they actually thought was a high performer, because someone can be really great in their skills. They could be a great salesperson, so they can be awesome, bring in a lot of money, generate a lot of revenue, but truly be a low performing employee. And so what does that look like? Low performing employees are usually, they take up a lot of time and energy. They're kind of high drama. They often have a lot of personal issues and things going on that I always say sort of tug at the leader's heartstrings, potentially illness, death in the family, all kinds of things. And I'm not saying that those things aren't true. It's just a lot going on all the time.
It kind of
Also,
reminds me of
oh, yeah.
the star football player, like the person who comes to mind, and this might be lost on you. I don't even know how much you know about football, but there was this guy named Randy Moss who was a high performer. He was like really, really, everyone would say he's a high performer. He's a great athlete, caught a lot of touchdowns, but the drama between the drugs and some of the other stuff that he did, I think he did have either some criminal behavior or some questionable behavior. And he bounced around to a bunch of teams because they probably ultimately realized that this was a low performer. And I think,
Mhm.
for some people, that analogy will help them understand, I think, what you mean. And then, there's plenty of other, I guess you would say there's a high amount of drama in a low performer's life, I
Yeah.
guess you would say.
There's a lot of drama, and they also are really resistant to like super basic things, like just following basic policies, procedures. There's always some reason they can't do it. And again, sometimes the reasons seem very reasonable, but you just got to keep asking yourself, like, why can't this person just do some of the basic stuff?
And
They can
and
even,
then,
oh,
sorry, go
no,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
What's the flip side then? What is the high performer? Is it like, it's not the boring person who just does everything they're told, is it?
No, absolutely not. So, your high performers are the people, first of all, they're going to show up for you. They're going to be people that you're counting on, not just in terms of their skills, but in terms of the whole picture, right? They're the people you can go to. You can say, we've got this challenge. They're going to be on board with helping you solve it. They're going to be the people you want to give cool projects to. And they will definitely push back. And this is where I think people get confused, because they're like, well, how do you know, do high performers just agree? Like you said, are they just boring? They're going to agree to everything? No, of course not. But they're going to disagree, what I always say, appropriately, whether that means in a more private setting, right? Or they're certainly not going to be trying to derail an initiative you have going on. They're not going to say to your face, like, hey, Craig, I'm on board, I can do this, and then go around and try to get the team derailed and off task, which is a low performer quality for sure. So they're typically highly productive. They're the people you count on. They're going to show up for you day after day. And they understand that the leader is going to have to make decisions that aren't always favorable to everyone all the time. But if they can get some background on it, they're willing to be part of it. Even if they disagree, they'll end up going with it, as long, obviously, we're not talking about anything unethical or, immoral or anything like that.
Absolutely. So you gave this presentation to our mastermind group the other week, and it was really, really fantastic. But I do want to take a step back and go, how the heck did you end up here? What were you doing in college or even before college that made you think, I want to be helping people become better in their jobs? Like, what got you into leadership and human resources?
That is such a good question. So technically, I fell into human resources. It was my second job out of college. I was hired to be an HR manager. They were literally looking for a person who was enthusiastic and who had a college degree. And I happened to fit both of those things. And I interviewed, I got the job, which is kind of unusual. So in the HR field, you typically start in a more entry level role. You don't start as an HR manager. There were 150 employees at the location I was at, and they trained me from ground up. So I really focused way more on compliance when I started, and that was, I can't even believe it, but over 30 years ago now. What started happening though in my career is as I went to different companies, I just started noticing that the laws were like the least of the issue, really. It was that people were put in leadership positions because they were often good at what they were doing, like day-to-day tasks, and then given very little training on what to do with the employees. And I certainly had my fair share of, I've been a bad leader myself. I've had my fair share of bad leaders. I've also had some great leaders. And I just really started noticing that the way you treat people can just have such an incredible impact on the workplace. And really, I mean, I think it starts from, who are you hiring, right? How you integrate them into the company? How do you keep them sort of engaged in the process? And also, and you and I even have talked about this, how important it is to know when it's time to let them go and go on and be somebody else's high performer. Just because they didn't work out for you doesn't mean they can't work out somewhere else.
Yeah, and so I believe you work with a lot of nonprofits as well.
Yeah, I do like about 50% nonprofit, 50% for profits.
Okay, so you've looked inside a lot of healthy and unhealthy organizations. And so what are some of the lessons? Let's focus on the positive. What are some of the lessons from the healthy organizations that you see that can be downloaded to the entrepreneur with as little as 3 employees, 10 employees, 20, 30 employees? Like, what makes a healthy organization, nonprofit or profit?
Okay, that's awesome. So a couple things come to mind. First, that the organization's really clear on what their values are and that they instill those values in every single person that they hire. And that's just something that they decide what they are. And I don't subscribe to any, it's got to be 10, it's got to be 15. I think it's got to be memorable and it's got to apply, right? If you can't even tell me what your values are, then we need to reevaluate the values because they're not really there. I think the other
how often do you think that healthy organizations how
health.
often and how are healthy organizations communicating those values?
Okay, in my experience, well, a healthy organization is doing a really good job at it, but
Right.
so many don't do it. So many, like, I'm just going to share this story really quickly. I remember this was several years ago. I was facilitating a workshop, and in the middle, and I was kind of new in my consulting career, and I said, okay, so I went to your website. And there are these values listed there, and I want to take these values and apply them. I think we were doing something about customer service, apply them to customer service. The room is silent. I probably had about 30 people in this room. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? Like, why is it so dead in here? What did I do? So I slowly start to find out that none of them even knew what I was talking about. They said, what website are you on? I was like, I'm on your website, like your company website. And they had no idea that those values are even out there. So I think, yeah, to be healthy, you've got to have them not only posted on a wall. I mean, I'm again less interested if they're on the wall. It's great to have them visual, but that you can articulate them as the business owner and that your employees understand and can articulate it, because it can actually make your job so much easier as a leader. If everything I'm doing I can measure against, is this in alignment with values? You're going to have your employees making the right decisions more of the time.
Well, so with that, we had you talk about onboarding at our mastermind, and how would you, as a person inside a healthy organization, communicate the values during the onboarding? And first of all, like, you should even just talk about the power of onboarding and why it's so important and where people drop the ball, and maybe just a brief overview of what people should be doing and when they should start onboarding. And then where do the values go in there? So they start to be communicated. So you start to get in that rhythm and flow, because that's such an important part of healthy organizations.
So important. So just so onboarding is that process that a lot of people think of in terms of paperwork, right? So I got to do the hiring paperwork, but that actually isn't onboarding. It sometimes is part of it, but it's not onboarding. Onboarding is where you're really taking someone that you've offered a job and you're starting to get them integrated, acclimated to your company, its culture, et cetera. In my opinion, it starts as soon as the offer is accepted. There's a lot of people who think, oh, they're giving 2 weeks notice at their last employer. I'll wait till that's done. And then on day one, we'll start talking to them. No, you should start the minute they accept the offer. And whether that be, you reach out via text or email, you check in. But I think that you should be checking in multiple times during that notice period so they know that you're excited about them coming there. I have one client who reaches out and asks like, hey, what are your favorite snacks? Because they do like a whole basket on their desk full of all their favorite snacks. They have like a coffee mug and all that stuff. So just so it's like, it's all about like, hey, not only are we so excited you accepted the job, but we can't wait for you to get here. And then in terms of what the onboarding process should look like, I try to push all that mandatory paperwork out as far as I can. Now I shared, I'm in California, we have a ton of mandatory paperwork, and I get it. If there's people from California listening right now, they're like, but how far out can you wait? Because we have all these rules about when things have to be filled out. I either will send it out in advance, right? So they're getting it done before day one, or I'm going to push it out as far as I can to the end of day one. But the first part of the day should be about like, hey, I'm so excited you're here, right? So I always say the leader, if it's an in-person deal, the leader should be meeting the person in the lobby. If you're on Zoom, they're in the Zoom room, 10 minutes before the employee even shows up. So the minute that they click their little, video on, their leader's sitting there ready to go. Like, I am so excited you're here. Cannot wait to work with you. And the whole first part of day one should be about what the values are, what the leader's expecting, and then also talking about really how this position is so valuable to the company and the organization, and like what the plan is, right? Like you're valuable, your position's valuable. This is how it fits into the team, and this is the plan. So way more time on that up front.
Yeah. So eventually today, we're going to talk about why today is such a tough hiring world. It's very difficult for companies to find the right people. It's a war for talent. And we'll talk about how important it is to have all this stuff in place so that you win that war. But what are a couple other lessons from healthy organizations? One is making sure that everybody understands the values.
Right.
Two is having a healthy onboarding process. Is there another one that really sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that kind of one of the very first times in my career, and I was a director of HR for a Fortune 500 company, and I had this amazing CEO there, and we were the second highest producing in terms of like volume and revenue in this whole company, and he was so good at every time we were going to be making decisions in the management group, and they did a lot of mergers, so we were constantly buying companies and merging with their teams. And I learned a lot about doing that there, but he was so good about asking questions about how that was going to be perceived by the people it was impacting. Like he would always stop and say, okay, so if we make this move and we do this and this person goes here and all that, what's the perception going to be of the other employees? And I remember that stood out to me because I'm thinking, this person's really busy. Like he's got a lot going on. He has to make some really tough decisions, but he always made time to stop and check out how that was going to affect morale. Didn't mean he didn't make a decision, right? He would still often go forward with it, but he might have a different plan of how we were going to do it so that he didn't keep ripping apart the team, right? And making them feel like, oh, this person doesn't even care about us, or they don't care about anybody who works here. And it was great. It was so great to not only see him do that as like such a key leader, but really instill that in all of the management team, which I think there are about 12 of us on his team. That was a thing that he just constantly would say to us, like, what's that? How's that going to feel for everybody else that's experiencing it?
Well, now that we're starting to talk about healthy leaders, what are one or two other things that you really see as being common characteristics of, good leaders, strong leaders, healthy leaders, especially in today's world where leadership has really changed from 10 years ago, 30 years ago?
Yeah. I think one of the number one questions I still get all the time, and when healthy leaders can do this, it's awesome, is just have excellent communication. It's so easy to praise people and to do all the good stuff, but it's so hard for leaders to have those tough conversations. But the ones that can do that and do them relatively well, I think many people struggle with that, but is so impactful because then your employees feel informed and they don't feel blindsided. So they're always getting feedback, and it's communicated in a clear way that's, not trying to cover the issue too much or code it in a way that somebody can't understand what you're trying to say to them. I think that's super key.
Got it. Fantastic. So going back to when you were a team member, at one point you decided to make the big leap and become an entrepreneur and become a leader yourself. What was the backstory behind that?
So it's funny because I don't remember exactly when I decided, but I know I decided I wanted to go out on my own. And right when I was thinking I would do it, I had this job. I was a training director. I was driving a long distance. I didn't really enjoy it. And so I just quit. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own business. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't at that moment, because I had 1, 2, 3 more jobs actually after that really shaped my career, right? I got a job with a privately held company that had 600 employees, and I went to a Fortune 500 company with 600 employees. And then I went to an entertainment startup company. So at that entertainment startup company, we went from 75 employees to 150 employees in a very short period of time. I was there 8 months. And then also in that very short period of time, they suddenly were going to be laying off half of those team members.
Whoa.
So I know it was really, really wild time. So I had met somebody who had a very successful marketing company. We became really good friends. And I just started telling her, I've always wanted to start my business. And so she's telling me kind of, here's sort of what you need to have in place. And like from her perspective, when she started her business, you kind of need 6 months in savings. It's going to take a little while to get customers. Even though I've had an amazing career, I don't come from like big name companies. Like I didn't work for Coca-Cola or those big names that a lot of time open a lot of doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I worked for some companies that people know about, but not like that. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, well, gosh, my company's doing this layoff, but they're not laying me off. So I decided to go to my CEO and propose that he would lay me off, which was very risky at the time, although he and I had a good relationship. And so I went in and said, hey, I want to be laid off. But that time they were only giving a month of severance roughly to people. And I said, but I can't leave with a month of severance. I need 6 months of severance. I only worked there 8 months, don't forget. And wow. He said, okay. He's like, I'm going to do it, but it's a couple of things they need from you. First, they needed me to help them get through this layoff because I was the only person who'd been through anything like that. I shared with you that bigger company I worked for, we were constantly merging. So I had a ton of that experience. So he's like, I need you to stay here for that. And then of course, we're going to be changing some positions and we're going to need you to help with some recruiting, but we'll have you do that. You can, work remotely and do that for us while you're starting your business. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge moment for me. And then that was kind of how I decided. I was just like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going out on my own. And I just have to share this because it's something that has always stuck with me, and it leads how I interact with people who think about wanting to start their own business now. Is that I had someone I reached out to. It's a couple that owned a staffing company, not marketing, staffing company. And I told them I met them years before at one of the companies I worked for. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm starting my own company. They took me to lunch. Side note, it's this place that I thought, oh, one day, like, I hope I can eat here. And it's really funny because I just went to dinner there the other night again. And I was like, oh, every time I come here, I think about this place. Like, oh, I hope one day, like, I could afford to pay the bill. What?
What place is it?
It's called the Fish Company. It's in Los Alamitos. It's like a local spot.
How far from Long Beach?
It's like 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Super close. Yeah, super close. But it was like, just seems so, like nice. And at that point, I'm like thinking, I hope I can go to a place like this one day. Right. But here's the cool thing that they did that forever kind of has changed the way I interact with entrepreneurs. They opened like their client book and they went through and they said, we're going to look at all the people that might need HR support. Because when I started my own business, I really focused on compliance first because I thought that would be a great way to get in the door. Here's all the clients that we think could use your help. And We will go with you to any client meeting if you want to help support you. And like the icing on the cake or the cherry on top was where they said, and you will never have to work for someone again unless you want to. Because if you do this and you run into a tough time and you can't get your groceries in or something like that, you just call us, and they own a staffing company. So we're just going to get you a temp job. We'll put you temp somewhere so you can earn a little money, and then you can go back to doing your own thing. And they're like, you will never have to work for someone again if you don't ever want to. And I was like, wow. And I did not know these people that well. Like, we weren't like hanging out on the weekend or socializing. We had met through, they were a staffing company for one of the places I worked at. I had worked with them for a few years. And that was like, so that support, I think it was just so huge for me to get that and to know that somebody had that kind of belief in me to really give me that opportunity.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So then how long have we been doing coaching together?
We are, I think we're like at 8 months, maybe. We're pretty new still.
And then, so then when you came into my world to get coaching, what were you struggling with in your entrepreneurial journey?
So I really, I want to grow my business financially. I really want to hit that 7-figure number. And I also know that I lack structure sometimes, right? You just did a video on this where it's like the scrolling circle. That is me. It's like, okay, let's go Instagram, let's go Facebook, let's go LinkedIn, let's go back to Instagram, let's go Facebook. It's like nothing's changed in the last 5 minutes that I need to know about. But I know, like, I'm very coachable. I know that about myself. I can follow guidelines, but sometimes I just need to, and I think every entrepreneur needs it. I think every leader needs this, obviously, because I do coaching as well. But I think you've got to have someone else's perspective from time to time. So I was hoping that you would definitely help me sort of in that sales marketing piece, and then also really implementing some new structures that kind of in my head, like intuitively, I guess I know it, but it's so hard sometimes to connect those things. Like, yeah, I shouldn't be scrolling, right? Versus I'm not scrolling anymore, and this is how I'm not going to do it.
What helps you get and stay focused?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, for sure. Gosh, that's a great question, Craig. What helps me stay focused?
I guess the power of deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, the power of deadlines is good. I also think just being really clear on what my end goal is and knowing that that is ultimately where I want to go. And if there are things along the way that are helping me get to that goal, like, I feel like what I've been trying to do, especially since I've been working with you, is everything serves some purpose. And even if the purpose is fun, right? It's like, okay, this is fun. Great. Is that serving me for that time? But if there's ever something in there that I'm really finding, like, why am I here? Like, this isn't serving any of my goals at all. So I really need to make a shift. And I've done a lot of that, of like sort of, I call it like cleaning up, like tidying up, so that everything sort of goes together and makes sense for me.
Excellent. So one of the things that I've been able to help you do is I've got you a couple of speaking engagements. So you spoke with Fit Body Bootcamp. What did you speak about with them, so that people listening, if they have an organization where they coach other entrepreneurs, or they have like if they run a franchise or something and have other franchisees who need to hear from you, like, what do you go and speak on at organizations and at seminars in the HR world?
Yeah. It seems like right now there's sort of a theme of topics, but what I spoke to them about was having crucial conversations. So really looking at those, that type of conversation that has a potential for conflict, and how we normally are so resistant to have those kind of conversations. So how do we have those tough conversations? How do we work through that? So that was awesome. Great response from that group. I'm actually speaking tomorrow for someone from that mastermind is going to have me connect with their owners and or their leaders, I suppose. And we're going to do creating a culture of accountability. Because again, another thing that's really important, not only for the leader to be accountable, but also how do you get your teams to be more accountable, which always points back at the leader, by the way. But that'll be a good one.
And so what would be like one of the big takeaways from that is that, like, how does a leader hold everyone, do a better job of holding people accountable? And how do we work with low performers? Because one of the keys that you mentioned about a low performer is that they're often late to important events and they're hard to hold accountable. So how does every leader improve their ability to hold people accountable? And then how do we improve the accountability of a low performer?
So I think what you said, like one of the things, and there's so many pieces, of course, in holding someone or creating a culture of accountability. But the one piece that I always say I feel like people really miss, there's kind of two, but one that they really miss is if they get to the point where they finally have the conversation, right? And they say, hey, these are my expectations. Here's where you are. We're not lining up. This is what I need you to do. They have that conversation. So they get to that point. A lot of times what leaders do is then go, okay, I had the conversation. And then what they don't realize is that it's very common for someone to have a spike up in the right direction, short term, but then they sort of fall off again. Well, the leader's already busy doing something else. So they haven't done the important piece is the follow-up. So instead, what I want them to do, and this works for low performers, you say, hey, this is where we're at. And this could be high performers too, that are having a misstep. But here's what I need you to do. And I'm going to check back in with you in 2 weeks. And you pick the date, the time, this is when we're going to check in. And you check in and you give praise if they're doing great. And you follow up if they're not doing so great. And you do another check-in. How long that goes on for really depends, right? It depends on so many things. How long a person's been with you. Is this the first time they've ever had a challenge? All those things. But people give attention to what is receiving attention. And when leaders just turn their attention elsewhere and just drop them off, then when they usually come back to me is, oh, I had this conversation and there they are messing up again. And I want to get rid of them. And so I'm like, well, back me up through this. Well, they had the conversation 3 months ago. They never talked to the person again. And so that was it, right? So now this person, sometimes people will say, well, don't you think they know? And I'll say, well, if they don't have any feedback, no news is no news. It doesn't mean anything. So I don't know what they think. I think that they think it's not important to you anymore. So they're not paying attention to it either.
Got it. So, one of the other things I want to ask you about was the crucial conversation. So let's say it doesn't matter if you have a low performer or a high performer, something went wrong and you have to have a crucial conversation with somebody about whether they were late for something, a project went off the rails, or they underperformed or misperformed, or they went off to a seminar and word got back from one of their vendors that they acted out of line. We've got a hard conversation to have with somebody. How do we have it?
So for sure, prepare yourself. Like, I think that's, again, so sometimes what leaders will do is they'll be like, okay, I got to have this conversation. Craig, I got to talk to you. And it's like, they're rushing through it and it's never beneficial for the other person because they're not even clear yet. So I'm like, get clear on what it is you want to say. Be really clear on what your intention is, right? Your intention should be, I want this person to be successful. I have information that will help them. So I'm going to convey that information. That should always be our intention. They may not make it. They may not take your feedback or your input, but our intention should be, hey, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let them be successful. So definitely preparation first. Go in with very clear intentions. Be clear. One of the things that I talk about a lot with leaders is there's I don't know if this is everywhere, but I know here a lot of times people use the term we. So what we're going to do is we're going to work harder and we're going to try to sell more. We're going to be nicer to the clients. And I'm always telling leaders, do not be afraid to say you, what I need you to do, right? What I'm going to do, I'm your supervisor and I'm going to train you. What I need you to do is I need you to take that training and apply it, rather than that we thing to soften the blow, if you will, because I think it's unclear and I think it gets muddled. And I have actually had employees come back to a supervisor and say, well, I thought you said we were doing this, right? Like, where were you?
Right.
And I'm
rhetorical
like,
we
kind of have a good point. So I think just being really clear, and then that same thing, crucial conversations, it's that follow-up again, that always comes up, that leaders drop the ball on that all the time. They get busy, something else comes up. They don't even think about setting a date. Then it's, instead of it being 2 weeks, it's been a month and a half. And the person's just over there, hopefully doing better, but maybe not, and maybe really struggling. And if they are doing better, they deserve that celebratory moment. They deserve that follow-up where you're like, awesome job. You have shown me that you got this and you're doing a great job. Perfect. I'm going to check in with you again, or maybe they've reached whatever goal it is that you're trying to get them to reach. And you're like, that was awesome. Congratulations. I'm so excited you could do it.
Yeah. So we talked about, in your mastermind, well, we didn't talk about, you talked about, let's be clear, You talked about that a lot of companies procrastinate on low performers, and what you were just saying there, sometimes a month and a half. Well, you actually told a story about a 20-year low performer. Why is it that entrepreneurs procrastinate on having the difficult conversations with the low performers?
I know 20 years, that was by far the longest term low performer I've ever worked with. They just kept transferring this person to other supervisors, like, oh, I can't work with this person, maybe you can work with them. But without even setting them up with training or giving them feedback of like why they were being transferred. They just kept saying like, oh, we need you over here. So I think just people naturally like to be liked. I think, again, leaders get promoted, they're often excited. Sometimes they don't have a great supervisor themselves and they're like, oh, I could do it better than that person, but they don't realize what the job is going to entail, and that there are definitely times that people are not going to like you. I mean, I always feel like if your team likes you, it's a bonus. Like I want you to go for that, because that's so awesome. That's a great feeling to have. But likability isn't what should lead every decision and communication you make. And if you're leading by that, like, I don't want people not to like me. I want to make sure that I'm still everyone's friend. I think that's where people struggle. And that's how someone ends up being a low performer for long periods of time, because no one wants to have that conversation.
What's the cost of a bad hire today, or the cost of hanging on to a low performer?
Oh my gosh, I just read some statistic where it was like, I don't remember the exact number, but it was so many thousands of dollars, like for hiring someone who's not a good match for your team, or keeping somebody. I mean, I think, as you know, you look at like how much your recruiting costs are, who all's involved in the hiring, what your training entails, right? All those things just start adding up. And then a cost that a lot of people don't think about is the impact it has on the team, because sometimes let's say low performer, your team may really like that person. Some people think that, oh, I don't have any low performers because everyone likes each other. There are low performers that are very, very likable. I'm convinced that's why they're in the company for a long time, because people really like them. So they keep giving them more opportunity, but they're really not a great match for the position. So I think there's that whole cost to the team too, and potentially losing a friend, right? Or someone that they really like, and maybe they won't totally understand why that person isn't there anymore. And so there's so many, even whether it be financial, but also sort of these hidden emotional costs that I think that a leader has to spend a lot more time cleaning up after they do make a decision to move a low performer on.
Well, the interesting thing is that you would think that companies like McDonald's and Walmart and all these giant companies would have figured out how to hire high performers over and over again. But just a couple of years ago, McDonald's had a CEO that, he got fired, I think, within 6 months through inappropriate office relationships. Like, how do these things go wrong? Like, how does a low performer like that, even though the person, clearly succeeded in their jobs before and was able to, quote unquote, trick the board into hiring, like, how does that happen? How do we go so wrong in hiring?
So, I mean, I think a lot of things happen. One, I think some people don't have a really clear hiring process and aren't very clear going in, right? Like I talked about having clarity going into a conversation. It's so funny. Right before we're talking now, I just had a conversation with a client where she was saying, how many people should I interview before I select someone? And I said, well, if you're really clear on who it is you're looking for, you're only going to need to meet them once. You don't need to meet 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 people, because you know exactly who it is that you're looking for, and you're going to recognize them like that. So I think a lot of people aren't clear. I think a lot of people go for skills over all of everything else. Like I would actually hire outside of skills. Like if they have a good attitude, they're trainable. Like, and I know I am definitely biased that way, because that was how my career started, right? I shared with you, they want an enthusiastic college degree. I didn't know a thing about human resources. I didn't know anything about facilitating workshops. They taught me everything. So I often reflect back, if I didn't get that opportunity, that was the beginning of a very long career of awesome opportunities, right? But I do think those things got to weigh in more, instead of it, is this, usually at the end of an interview, what I ask my clients to do is kind of have 2 columns. Where are the strengths? Where are the potential challenges? And when you go down those potential challenges, what you should be asking yourself is, do I have the skills to train this person? And if the answer is no, you're done. It doesn't matter how great their strengths are. It doesn't matter where they've worked or anything else, you're done. And then if you say, yes, okay, yes, I do. I have the skills. I can teach them how to do that. Do you have the time? Because a very common thing that gets said is, and I want someone that's going to hit the ground running. Well, that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, I've been doing this for 30 years. Even if I went to work at your company, Craig, I know HR. I don't know your company though. I don't know your values, your culture, how to get things done. I don't know all the stuff. You're going to have to train me. So if you don't have the time to train me, or someone on your team, you can't delegate that kind of training, then you got to move on. And I don't really know how you hire somebody without the time. Like, you got to have the time, but some things you might decide, hey, you know what? I could do it. I don't have the time. So I'd rather hire somebody that comes with that skill. That would be better to me. But it's that important saying no and hanging in there until you actually find the right person.
Got it. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I want to address are the low performer and high performer traits, and how we deal with these people. So the low performers, there's 7 traits of a low performer that you shared in the mastermind. One is that they know what everyone else is doing. They need a lot of attention when they initiate a project. They're hard to find, which is interesting, especially in this day and age of remote working. They miss or they're late to important events, and they're hard to hold accountable. They report concerns or issues in terms of everyone. So what do you mean by that? Like, everyone thinks this is a problem?
Yes. Like everyone's talking about the fact that so-and-so isn't doing their job, or everyone's concerned about this new software implementation and that's not going to go well. Right. To give you that gloom and doom, like the team is falling apart.
Right. And then number 6 is they want to remain hidden from leadership attention, and they resist change to the point of derailment. So if somebody checks all these 7 boxes, like, we just got to get rid of them, or it's like, can you fix somebody like that? Or if there's one thing, can you fix it? Or if there's 3 things, that's when they have to go, like, what's our take on a low performer? Are they just a low performer, and if they have any of these, they just have to go?
So sometimes, it's sometimes when it is hard to turn them around. I mean, it's true. It just depends on, like, how long have they been allowed to go in the wrong direction, and do they even have the interest and ability to be able to go in the right direction? So I think that if you identify, if you're like, okay, yep, you might even have just one of them, and you're like, that might be a low performer, right? So I've often, and in the mastermind, I talked about this whole pizza situation. Maybe you have 90% of so I guess I should back up and say, if I was having a potluck, or, people over to my house for dinner, and I say, hey, I want you to bring a pizza, there's going to be like 10 people there. Do I want you to show up with a whole pizza, a slice of pizza, half a pizza, right? I want you to show up with the whole pizza, because if you showed up with just a piece, yeah, we could, oh, but Ann, it's the best pizza, right? We brought it in from Chicago or somewhere. Everyone could just cut it up into tiny little pieces. Like, that's what it feels like when you have a low performer. It's like there's one slice that they're doing really well, but we're just nibbling off that little slice, instead of a high performer is going to be the whole entire pizza, right? So maybe if you have one of these things, maybe there's just an aspect of them that is starting to demonstrate signs of low performer behavior, and you want to get on that right away to find out, is this something that we can turn around, or is this part of a bigger issue? So I think, you've got to go back. I always call it a hard reset. You go back, you reset. You say, here are my expectations. Here's what you're doing. Here's what I need you to do. Are you interested? And I think it's important to ask them if they're interested. Are you interested in meeting these expectations? And if they say no, then I think you are done. Then they're like, no, you know what? I don't really know if this is a job for me. Okay, well, then we appreciate your time. Let's work out a transition plan. Let's move on. But if they're like, no, I think I can do it, or if they give that little resistance of like, well, that's not the way we've always done it, or things are different. It's like, yes, things are different. You're correct. And the question is, do you think you can come along with the new changes? And if they say yes, then I'm willing to give them a try, but you got to be really close on that follow-up, like really keep up with them, because it is hard. And as you said that, what I was thinking is, sometimes I just really think people got hired in to the wrong job, or the job's outgrown the skills of the person. So when I say low performer, because sometimes it's like that person, it's not who they are. That's why I say they can be someone else's high performer. They just really might no longer, or maybe never were, a match for your position in your company.
Got it.
Yeah.
So now we flip over to the 7 traits of the high performers. And one is they put the work in day after day. They learn from others while seeking self-directed opportunities. They seek feedback about their performance. They take every project as a platform to grow and learn. They're highly productive. They exude passion and positivity, and they understand their supervisor's decision-making process. So how do we help the high performers flourish? And how do we lift people up into the high performance situation?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. That's actually a whole other workshop I have, is all about paying attention.
I can imagine it's not a two-word answer.
You know, paying attention to this high performers, because you need to pay attention to them. So, you know, you want to first of all, let them know if they're a high performer for your team, let them know that. I really appreciate what you've done here and give specific examples. I want to ensure that you remain engaged and that you don't get bored. So what are things that I could provide for you that would help you continue to stay excited here? One of the things your high performers are going to count on you to do is get rid of your low performers when they don't step up 100%, or they will go. Because then they're wondering, well, why am I working so hard when this behavior is allowed to continue? But they might want opportunities for training. They might want exposure to a certain project. You know, I know quite a few people now are starting some different kind of book club situations with their high performers and really trying to engage their mind, giving them time during the workday to meet, talk about these books that they're reading. So it's all you have to do is ask them what they need. And it is so easy. They will tell you exactly what they need to stay engaged, and you do the best you can to provide as many opportunities as you can for them. And keep them engaged as long as you possibly can. And I think just being super honest that you want them to stay. You don't want it to get to be too routine for them, where they're wondering, well, do I need to look for another job now because maybe I've maxed out here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Anne, this has been really, really fantastic. And you can see, like, you just have so much experience with working with so many organizations and really clearing out the clutter that they have with their team and helping people become high performers. So how can people get a hold of you to do presentations to their teams, to their, groups of entrepreneurs, et cetera, and to help come in to their business and fix these conflicts that they may have, or this, improve the performance level of their teams?
Awesome. There's really 3 easy ways. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, just as my name is spelled, super easy.
So that's ANNELAGUZZA. Right?
I love that. That's it.
Yes.
You got it.
Awesome.
And then I have a website that's theworksconsulting.com, which is THEWORKS consulting, CONSULTING.com.
Awesome. And then, so what would you say, and just in terms of the productivity and all the stuff that I've taught you, what are some of your favorite lessons that have really, really helped you out in what we've been working on together?
Oh my gosh, there's so many lessons, but I think, and I've shared this with you, I know, but one of my favorite things that you've shared with me is sometimes just looking at engaging with clients in different ways. I often go in like, are we gonna be able to work together? Yes or no? And you've really taught me that, yeah, maybe somebody isn't a match for you, but there still is something you can give them so that they walk away feeling great about the situation, rather than just, yeah, we're not a match, sorry, bye, which I've done in the past. And now I know, through you, I've learned that there's lots of things I can offer. I can offer some kind of, material for them that I've produced. I can lead a webinar for them at no cost. There's so many things I can do, and that's huge. And then I just have to say, like, I put so much structure into my work week since I started working with you. Mm-hmm. Tuesdays and Thursdays right now are absolutely no client day. And it's so that I can be super free in my mind. I can be creative. It just frees me up from having to problem solve, right? Or do coaching, which takes a different type of part of my brain. And I was finding myself super tired at the end of the day. And when I sat down and looked at it, it was like, well, because like I'm over here doing this and I'm doing that, and then I'm doing that person, helping this person, then I'm over here writing marketing copy, and it was so much. So that's
white space is key. White space on your calendar.
Oh my gosh, it's huge. And I even have very specific times that I check email now too. I don't check it all day when it just keeps coming in. I have very specific times that I check it. And that's just how I do it. And Oh, there was one other thing that we were talking about. The whole scheduling thing has been so key.
Yeah.
Oh, Craig, it went out of my head. There was one other thing that's been so
Oh, is it
helpful.
related to your perfect week, your perfect day, your morning routine, your
Yeah, I mean,
shutdown,
you
your
definitely
planning?
are helping me so much with my morning routine. I am still a work in progress, truth be told. You know, when I take your polls, I'm still being honest,
Huh.
but it just keeps getting better. And I'm really, I know that when I do it the way you tell me to do it, it works. And my day is so much more productive. And I just feel better throughout the entire day. So it's so worth it.
Right. And so you're just going for and building that high performance productivity week, just like you go and help build high performance teams and organizations and leaders. So, and that's, you just do a slightly different version of what I do. And I'm really grateful for you sharing with my mastermind group. Like it really, really helped people with so much conflict in their teams, and, the onboarding information that you shared here and went a little bit deeper in our mastermind was absolute gold. So thank you very much. I'm super excited to see you at our first mastermind event in person for like 2 years. It's going to be amazing. And everyone listening, go to theworksconsulting.com or find Ann Laguza on LinkedIn or Instagram. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate it.
No problem. We'll see you very soon, Ann. And everybody, I would highly recommend you do what Ann did and read The Perfect Week. So perfectweekformula.com, and apply that, and you'll have more white space on your calendar to get more done. All right, everybody, we'll see you next time on the Early to Rise radio podcast.